Have at it, son.
What's that?
I said, have at it, son.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. We're appreciate the opportunity to get together in August to talk about land use. And a couple things on the agenda today, and mostly kind of prompted by the potential for a special town meeting coming up. We had a few things to talk about, so I might jump around the agenda a little bit, but we're going to talk about a couple of some land use amendments, items that we might want to do for a special town meeting, and then we have to adopt the remote meeting policy. So I don't know if we want to take things out of order and just adopt the remote meeting policy first and then get to the other things. How do you guys want to handle it?
Let's do the remote meeting process.
All right, let's go to number 3 on the agenda. So Derlin, I think you were just explaining the remote meeting policy, but is there anything more you want to, we need to go?
No, not really. Basically what it is, and this, I went to a meeting of the main city managers last week, and a couple of the legislators apparently are unhappy that they didn't make it a little more flexible than what it is, given the fact that the COVID thing seems to be coming back. Basically, the key is that the expectation is that the boards will meet in person unless they have a reason not to. But on the other hand, they also want to allow the public and any member that may be indisposed and not able to make it to be able to participate. So what it is, it's a hybrid process, which is what we're seeing right now. We've got some of the members here and table and others of you out there in the audience. There's some talk that they may liberalize the policy a little bit, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. But right now, this is the policy that the board adopted. It is based on the Maine Municipal Association, and I think it will work reasonably well for us. So if there's any questions on it, I'd certainly be happy to try to address them.
Anybody have any questions? We need to make a motion to adopt the policy.
So,
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Might as well just go across, go through the room and just say, since we're both.
You have to do roll call.
I'm going to do Bill's, take Bill's lead from the planning board. So I'm just going to go through everybody's name, just the way I wrote them down. Jerry.
Yeah.
Yes. Chuck.
Yep.
Buckland. Yes. Stephanie.
Yep.
Dave.
Yep.
Bill.
Yes.
Katrina.
Yes.
I think that's all the voting members, right?
so
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Now what? Do we have to sign it, Derlin?
yeah,
Or
we should have.
Yeah, I will, what I'll do is put everyone's name underneath it, like I did planning board. And once it's ready, I'll email you and let you know you have to come down and sign it.
Some of the
Okay.
ones here, I know the ones that.
Yeah, but I don't have their names printed under it.
Oh, okay.
I did planning boards like that, but.
Well, good. But we've got it on record that we are officially done, so that's good. The signatures is just a formality.
By the way, this was published in the newspaper on August 12th, and the remote policy was also published in the newspaper.
Super. You're too efficient, Kim.
Sorry. It's just obvious.
I think it's great.
all right. So the next thing on the agenda, back to the top, is just discussing what items we might want to start working on, some land use changes, and we have some time to think about some different ones, and there's some ongoing items that we're supposed to be working on, what I'll call like more planning, village planning type items, which I don't think we need to add to the list tonight. But I had 3 or 4 things on the list that also are kind of pertinent potentially to a potential special town meeting. So maybe we can just go down the list, start talking about some of those items and then decide, you know, we can start to think about prioritizing which ones might be best for a special town meeting and which ones we might want to hold for a regular town meeting. Does that make sense? Great. All right. So the first one I have on the list is one that Kim and I have been dealing with recently, and it relates to access. So do I have the ability to share screen, Kim?
Yes.
All right, stand by. Just going to share this one page. Sweet. Actually, can see myself sharing. That's crazy. That's awesome. Anyway, so on the screen, you should be seeing something that just says 6B11 lots, and then there's 6B11.11.2, which deals with access. I'm going to try to do the 101 on this, Kim, and then there's probably some details that you'll want to jump in because I might glaze over some things. But essentially, over multiple times, Kim, we've had this discussion. We have a lot of lots in town that have access on either underdeveloped driveways or substandard roads or even paper roads where their lots pre-exist any sort of ordinance standards. So we've tried to address this issue a couple of different ways. And I think, when was the last time we did it? 2015. We changed some language under 6B11.2 to help try to address that, but we're still having some interpretation issues with some of the legal staff in order to be able to have existing lots be able to be developed even though they don't meet current road or driveway standards. I think that's pretty much the crux of the issue, isn't it, Kim?
Yep.
So we're working with Andy at Eaton Peabody to try to figure out how we address this. And essentially, and there's a couple of different policy options that we have to think about as a community. But one of them is, like, first and foremost, like what type of access do we fundamentally want to require for lots? So if you kind of, I like to think about it about breaking out 6B11.2 into like different sections. So if you take the first section, this is like what we fundamentally want to require that lots must have in order to be built upon. You have to have a private road or driveway access that's you know, safe for fire, police, and emergency vehicles. And that's sort of like the fundamental access. So for example, if you have a lot that's on a paper road that isn't built yet, but the lot is already existing, you could work with Kim or the fire chief to say, we could build a driveway or a road here that meets the safety requirements. And that's sort of like the fundamental cut. Does that make sense? So it's essentially like kind of combining both of these sections.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the safety requirement of the roads that you're driveways you're looking for?
Well, then the second question would be, now, all right, we want to require all lots to be able to have we want to require all lots to maintain safe access for fire, police, and emergency vehicles. So then the next question really is like what you were asking, Chuck, what is safe access? And I think what we're kind of getting at is we're going to end up kind of splitting and we haven't figured out the full solution to this yet, but splitting the access one into two, like 2A and 2B, or 2A, 2B, and 2C, something like that, where you have one that deals with lots in a subdivision. So right now we currently have a provision in the subdivision ordinance that allows the planning board to determine whether or not you have to meet all the roads, you know, whether or not and what road standards you need to meet in order to meet that safety or that safe access requirement. So we already have a provision in there. I think it's 511 or something like that in the subdivision ordinance.
514.
514, sorry, it's right here. So there'll be that one more specifically. So this would be like for all. Then there's then there's the lots that are a couple of lots that need to meet driveway standards. So we have that provision in there. And then I think we need to do something for lots that pre-exist some of these standards so that the code enforcement officer can determine whether or not the standards are being met, just like the way we are interpreting it now is the way that we, or in the past have interpreted it is the way that I think we want it to be. So in certain situations, the code enforcement officer can just make that determination by getting feedback from the fire chief and whoever to make sure that it's a safe access.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if I'm fully explaining that well enough, Kim, but you may be able to add some value to this conversation.
Yeah.
But it's a little,
Okay.
it's kind of complicated, even in my mind. We've been thinking about it for a little while. So.
Yeah, so the reason why we added access in the ordinance under 6B11 too was in 2015, when we did away with the minimum lot width requirements for lots on a roadway, we added this. Because I was running into a lot of lots that were created that did not meet the minimum width of the lot requirement on a road in the zoning district the property was located. And so we added this. This was supposed to be intended, and it was described and explained when we added this, that this would only apply to new lots. We had the word new after access, no new lot may be built upon, but it was taken out by legal counsel. And if I remember correctly, it was taken out because it was kind of singling out that specific lots. But when we did this, we didn't take into consideration non-conforming lots of record, which means they predated any zoning ordinances or any rules at the time. And like Noel said, they may have a paper street currently on a plan, but it's not built out. And so now we're saying, sorry, we added this section and we didn't add access under non-conforming lot provisions in the ordinance. So now we're telling you, you have to either build the road up to the street design and construction standards of the subdivision ordinance if it serves, a private road serves more than 2 lots, or you can go to the planning board for a waiver, which means everybody that wants to develop their lot on a private road, which currently doesn't meet the street design and construction standards of the subdivision, will be going to the planning board.
How long is that waiver good for?
The waiver would be good for it go with a lot, would be my understanding.
Yeah.
And then also we, pre-existing subdivisions back in, the 80s, before the subdivision ordinance was adopted in 1990, a 40-foot wide right-of-way was adequate for a subdivision road to be built in. And today, the street design and construction standards requires a 50-foot wide right-of-way with a cul-de-sac if it's a dead end, with a 16-foot travel with 3-foot shoulders. And so adding this to the ordinance wasn't intended to affect pre-existing lots pre-2015 that met the minimum lot width requirement at the time the lot was created on a private road. And it wasn't intended to prevent non-conforming lots of records to be able to develop their lot. And so recent legal determination has informed us that because this wasn't in there, even though the intent was there, it's not written that way. So therefore, should I get appealed or, a question about the authority of me issuing permits, we need to rectify this now. And so that's why we're dealing with this right now. And I'd like to get it resolved, and that's why with a special town meeting coming up, I'd like to jump on the wagon. And I did tell the selectmen that, and they were like, the more the merrier, so this is one item I'd like to get rectified sooner than later. I mean, we suppose we could wait till May, but I'd like to do it as soon as we can have a special town meeting to prevent this stuff from happening.
So I don't think that there's, I mean, obviously you guys don't have anything to react to on paper in terms of the code. We're actually having a follow-up meeting with Andy and another person from Eaton Peabody on Thursday, I believe, before, yeah, I think it's Thursday. And we're waiting for them to send us back a couple of suggestions that we talked about last time. But I think the fundamental question is, A, does it sound like a problem we want to make sure we address, which to me it does. And B, do we want to kind of kick this to a special town meeting now that we have the opportunity? And then we'll work on, here's the language for you to review.
Okay, I have a question though.
Yep.
So this is just basically, in layman's terms, I guess, giving Kim the right or permission to grant these roadway. I mean, is that the gist of it? Instead of going to planning board, it's giving Kim the right as the code enforcement officer to say these roads and subdivision or whatnot are okay? Is that kind of the gist?
Not necessarily would that be the
Okay.
end result. I think it would be more, what we're trying to solve is the problem where you have pre-existing lots that just can't meet any of this, that can't meet the standards as were put in the ordinance because they were created either well before or before the standards came into place. So we also might have to, so there's an issue with regard to like nonconformities and stuff that we need to think about too, that's all part of it. I won't go into that.
Okay, so it's a couple different sections of things.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
to some degree that we want to provide the flexibility for the code enforcement officer to be able to make a judgment call using some standards in the ordinance where it's appropriate, because it's also more of a burden to these pre-existing lots to have to go to planning board. But
Okay.
that doesn't necessarily apply to lots that are like, say, at the end of a, when you create a new lot at the end of a subdivision road
Mhm.
that is currently undersized, you might, whatever we're doing, there might be a process for that person, like is currently in section 514 of the subdivision ordinance, to say, hey, planning board, this lot, this subdivision has a fully standard road, but only a 30-foot wide right of way instead of the required 50-foot wide right of way. Shouldn't we be able to add some lots to the end of this road?
So it's just, it's giving Kim permission to say it's okay or not, instead of people now having to deal with planning board,
In some situations right now, even the planning board standards wouldn't apply. So
Okay.
they're kind of stuck.
Okay.
So we're
Yeah,
helping about that.
Stephanie, with non-conforming lots,
Mm-hmm.
specific to that, in the ordinance, it states that, even though they may not meet the minimum lot size or lot area, or they don't meet the shore frontage, or they don't meet the lot width, they can still build without a variance. So that ideally is triggering me to be able to issue permits
Right.
for non-conforming lots of records, lawful lots, even though they don't meet those. But because we didn't add access
Right.
under that exception also, it's triggering them to have to bring their roadway out, which
Okay.
wasn't the intent when we did that.
Right.
Like the lot might be non-conforming just because of the access.
Right. Okay. Is this a huge problem? I mean, are there that many non-conforming lot, or is it just something we
There's a
should
few.
just? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few, yeah, and it's not just them, it's pre-existing lots that met the minimum width of the lot on the roadway before we changed it to this access in 2015 that I'm coming up against too.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So to me, it's, we're further trying to clarify and address an issue that's been around for a while, which is the reason why we made the changes in 2015 to begin with.
Okay. Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah, because before, if your lot met the minimum width on the road, say you needed 100 feet on a roadway, and the lot met that, then it didn't matter if the road was built up to the street design and construction standards in the subdivision ordinance, because it would be a pre-existing private road. But as long as you had 100 feet along the front of that roadway, and that was your zoning, and you met the minimum lot size, then you could develop it. But like I say, we took that away because I was running into a lot of lots that were created that didn't meet the minimum lot width at the roadway. So they created non-conforming lots.
Right. Okay.
So then we took it away as long as they had access and that, but it wasn't intended to do pre-existing. It was really for new lots was the intent for that.
So it's the word new, the removal of the word need.
Yeah, but it was taken out and then, like I said, there was a reason they took it out, and I think it was because it was singling out, looking like we were singling out, which
You are.
yeah, but it was, and no one may remember why they took it out, but we had it in there initially, and the legal counsels took it out.
Yeah, that I don't remember. I thought we had it pretty well nailed down at that point,
Me
so.
too. So here we are again.
Yep, here we are. Anyway, so I think something along the lines of what I just outlined is probably the direction that we're gonna head, which is having, the broader policy question about providing a certain, providing safe access that's the first requirement. And then there's some standards that you have to meet for different scenarios, but I don't know
And
exactly.
just to let you know, a couple of these have gone before the planning board for private roads, and the letters that have been written by the fire chief have all been, as long as the road meets the driveway standards in the ordinance, that's been accepting, which is a 12-foot travel with 14.5 clear, with 2.5 on each side, clear above and on the sides of the driveway, and it can withstand the 70,000 pounds of the fire truck and the turning radiuses. He's been signing off as far as determining by the fire chief if it's adequate and safe, that if it meets the driveway standards, that's been acceptable. So
The turning radius must be pretty big.
in a truck, it's 36 feet to the front when it comes around. But then at the dead end, you need a 65-foot radius cul-de-sac.
Okay,
He's been, so far though, he says also like the distance of the driveway going into, they can back up versus having to have a turnaround. But he's also saying if you could do like pull-offs or, and just lemming and maintaining your driveway or roadway for that matter too. Because we've gone to a couple on the ones we've gone to so far haven't been too bad. One was kind of a steep hill at the incline, the intersection to the roadway. But he says as long as they widen like the shoulders a little bit, and it could be gravel, it doesn't have to be hot top. It could even be grass as long as it's like a shelf that can withstand the 70,000 pounds. And just a lot of it's been maintaining the trees and no boulders and stuff. Keep the 14.5 clear. That's been most of his letters thus far.
yeah, I mean, I think
Yes.
there's a lot to be said for the planning board, that process, just in terms of being a little flexible with road standards. And it has to be in the subdivision ordinance, by the way, because the planning board doesn't have the ability to waive dimensional standards in the ordinance. But, it's there's a lot to be said for that level of flexibility where we've been to I think we've all seen lots or roads in the town of Mount Desert, which are well under the required, current road standards, which are completely fine. And you kind of want to maintain that character, but there's some creative ways to help, improve safety and access, like what Kim was just talking about in terms of pull-offs and stuff. But also, once you've got a fully built out subdivision and it's on, say, a 30-foot wide right of way, it's not very easy to go back and try to get everybody to give you an extra, right of way over their property. So I do think continuing some provision like that is going to be part of this process anyway, but I think we just need to address the 3 different scenarios.
Does Mike have a criteria that he uses to write those letters?
Yes.
And it's written down in plain view
Yeah.
somewhere?
Yeah, he uses our land use zoning ordinance.
Okay,
And he also does have standards that he has on a separate sheet of paper that he's given me. And he's also given me a diagram for the turning radiuses for his trucks.
okay.
All right, so what do you guys think about keeping this on the front burner for a special town meeting?
Yes.
What else is gonna be in the special town meeting?
Well, I think what the plans are is to have architectural renderings approved for the station in Soamesville, I think. Pretty sure that's what he wants to try to get on there. And I'm trying to think if there was something else that the board wanted to put on. That's the only thing right now that pops to the top of my head, Jerry. There may be something else there. And I'm sure some other things may come up in the interim.
So there's enough stuff to actually have a special town meeting.
I believe, yeah, I think so. And the fact is, I think, with the fire stuff, it'd be controversial enough so you shouldn't have any trouble getting a quorum.
No.
Getting the 50 people. Now the question is where we can have it. I'm working with the school to see if they're gonna let us go in there. So Mark Gauss is not committed to that yet. So things are still up in the air, but we'll figure it out. We'll have some sort of a place where we can get people together. So.
And what's the date?
We don't know yet.
We don't know. It's probably not going to
It's
be.
gonna be probably January. is what
Probably
Mike said.
January, yeah. So it's going to be a while. Maybe things will be better then, and we'll be able to easily hold the meeting. So, but probably not. But we'll figure it out somehow. One thing's for sure, we won't be in a parking lot in January.
No,
You know
no,
that.
let's hope not.
We're going to find some indoor. 50 people. What's that?
You won't get 50 people.
No, I don't think so. He wouldn't get me.
You can build snowmen, they come.
So we'll find some sort of an indoor venue also to get it done.
Yeah, in any event, I mean, this is an issue that we're going to want to work on. So, if we know we're just sort of front burnering, finishing up the product in preparation for a special town meeting. If you have one, great, and it makes sense to put it on the agenda, then we should do that. If not, we'll at least have it ready for early for the May annual town meeting.
Do we have people right now that are stymied for their builds because of this?
Are they what?
Are they being held back from building right now because of this?
No.
Selling the lot?
Huh?
Selling the lot?
Selling
Being
lots?
held back
No,
from selling lots?
no, not new lots, no. New lots automatically, I picked the planning board. Because like I said, that the intent was for new lots.
Just had.
Yep, you did, yep. And that was a pre-existing lot.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
All right. So the next one is something related to minimum lot area or lot size in the village commercial district. See if I can pull up the ordinance. Okay, so Kim, again, I'm going to try to explain this, but you might be able to give me a little backup. We recently made a change in the village commercial district, which allows which is allowed through a footnote for trying to find the footnote.
Hey,
Footnote P, which allows for lots within the village commercial district that have public sewer. The minimum lot area required for each dwelling unit on a single lot is 1,000 square feet. So I think when we were originally planning for this, we looked at, the village of Northeast Harbor. We looked at we looked at, was it Sylvan City is another area that's village commercial.
Yeah.
We looked at Seal Harbor. And we didn't look very closely, I don't think, at Soamesville, but there's a lot of lots. There's a few lots in Soamesville that are really big. And the end result is, you know, you could have a lot that's a potential lot that's like a couple acres that would potentially allow for a lot more dwelling units than I think was the intent of this particular change. But I think we just need to discuss, you know, whether or not we want to make a modification to the village commercial district, you know, minimum lot size standards to be able to, so I'm not sure what there's no good answer to this I don't have anything on paper for you at this point.
But you can use my example that I sent you. You don't have to say the specific location, but
Yeah.
that I ran into.
Well, why don't you talk it through, Kim, while I pull it up real quick?
Well, I sent it to you. I didn't print it, but
No, I'm
there's a
gonna pull it up.
property,
I'm pulling it up on the screen. Just hold on.
there's a property for sale in the village commercial district, and it was, I think, two something acres. So I had somebody ask me how many dwelling units they can have on that property, and it come up to like 95. And that area of this location would have been, that was just way too much. So I don't, so I sent that to Noel. I said, we gotta talk about this, and I also got an opinion from Maine Municipal on it. They didn't, the people that were inquiring about it weren't looking to do that many. I think they wanted 7 townhouses, but even then, that might be 2.15 acres.
Yeah. So, you know, the end result of the good intention was, you know, again, part of the confusing thing about the ordinance that I keep saying is like every time you make a tweak somewhere, it always has some crazy ripple effect that we can't anticipate just because of the way the zones are standardized. And I think this is one of those situations where we're trying to allow for more dense development in a village commercial setting that's more akin to like the Northeast Harbor village commercial area versus a village commercial that's more like Soamesville, which is a little less dense. At least in my opinion. You guys can feel free to disagree. But
If you go down, if you go down, show the email there when you calculate.
Yeah, so if you calculate, you know, 2.15 acres gets you, you know, the number of square feet divided by 1,000, 93 acres.
Where's the 1,000 figure coming from?
That's
It's
footnote.
footnote P.
Oh, okay. I didn't see footnote B come. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, P is in Paul, right there. It's highlighted. in
Oh, there it
green.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Suppose I should wear my glasses, huh?
No, that wasn't done that much, Jerry. I'm going to take credit for that. But so I think it's more of a policy question. I don't know the answer, but it's sort of like, okay, now we're really thinking about land use policy. Like, where do you want the density? Is it in a place like Northeast Harbor? Is it really, do you want to have, like already the policy choice was by the town in Soamesville, there's a designated village commercial area. So theoretically, the town wanted to have a 5,000 square foot minimum lot size in that area, which we haven't changed ever. It was not part of what I don't think since I've been working for the town on these kinds of issues we've addressed, we haven't even, that's always been that way.
What would happen if we added public water also?
What
If
was
you made
it?
it public water,
Public sewer and public water.
I don't think that would make a difference. I think it would be the same thing.
Soamesville has public water out there, right?
No.
What definition?
We use buckets. We go down to the stream and fill the buckets.
Awesome.
It's pumping out of the pond there, Jack.
So I don't know the full answer to the question right now.
Honestly, I don't think this lot in question could withstand that many buildings or, you know, do the lot coverage, but this is what you're facing. And I don't know, huh?
I think the question would be, could you do 93 units in like in a couple of apartment buildings, or
So you gotta
And
go
I'm not-
up, right?
literally not passing judgment on the density question? I mean, it could be a great thing. I don't know. I guess I'm just asking the question, like, all right, do we just, this sort of pulls up, brings to the front the question that what we were trying to address, I believe, through this footnote was allowing density in Northeast Harbor. Whereas,
If you tried to put 93 dwelling units on a 2-acre plot, you would have to build apartments or wall to wall 800-foot buildings. You couldn't, you'd fill the whole lot.
yep. Well,
So
the math, and the math
You
might,
can cover 75% of the property, and driveways and parking areas don't count.
Yeah, so you couldn't fit 93 dwelling units on that 75% of the separate dwelling units.
No,
Unless-
not separate.
Unless they went up, right?
Yep. If they go up, they can, with planning board approval, they can go over 40 feet.
Yeah.
So then you're looking at possibly skyscrapers or another cell towers.
so my bigger question for the committee is, do you know, this seems like something that we might want to put our heads into a little bit and try to come up with like just to clean up the policy approach a bit, but I just wanted confirmation on that.
No, yeah. Where are there other village commercial districts other than Northeast Harbor? Does Otter Creek have them?
No,
Soundsville has it, right?
Steel Harbor.
Yep.
Soamesville has some,
Yeah.
and then, Sylvan City has known, and then right here in Northeast Harbor.
Mhm.
Okay.
So the other way to look at it is not to, again, it's just like a balance, try to not to have, not to get overly complex with your zoning. You could create a village commercial S and a village commercial NEH and a village commercial, SH. There's a bunch of, you could create sub-districts within village commercial that are basically the same thing, but maybe the village commercial NEH and Seal Harbor are the ones that allow for the 1,000 square feet, but the other ones don't.
Yeah, because Noel, I'm thinking about like if it was Northeast Harbor,
I think.
if it was downtown, where like then you're into the parking issue. Like how,
So I would deal with parking as a whole separate thing. Stephanie.
That's a whole
That's a
separate-
whole separate question, not necessarily. It is tied to density a little bit, but I think there's
Yeah.
ways, I think it's a conversation, parking is a conversation we should be having.
Yes.
okay.
I would add that to the list of things that we want to kind
Well,
of,
because I was thinking if someone had 7 townhouse units or whatever in the middle of Northeast Harbor or what, like where are they even gonna park? I mean, I would think the units would take up quite a bit. And then where do you get 7 cars? I mean, but there are different issues. Is that what they're different?
I mean, that it's all related to how dense you want to have your area, but I think the solution to parking in a place like Northeast Harbor
Mhm.
is different than it might be if you did it
Right. Yeah.
It's different.
Well, you would,
Parking in general is something that I think we want to start to dive into a bit.
Yes.
It's a
This
hop up.
scenario, this would become a subdivision, correct?
It definitely would be a subdivision, yes.
Does the planning board take care of it?
I mean, the planning board could take care of it within a set of standards, and it might not be 93 units, but it could be 50.
Hmm.
No, I'm just throwing out a number. I mean, I just think more importantly than just thinking about this one specific thing, this is just an example of what the math tells you. And is that what we want? Just as a basis. Would it be better to start with a higher, in certain areas, would it be better to start with a larger lot size?
I think,
Workforce housing?
There'll be, I mean, 5,000 square feet is it's a good size.
Mhm.
But yeah, it could be workforce housing. It's a policy question, Chuck. I'm asking the question. I have no,
I think there's, I think divvying it up into separate towns is not the way to go.
well, that's definitely messier. I'm just throwing out options, Jerry.
Yeah, that's just gonna make it so complicated.
It's the opposite of what we're trying to do.
Yes.
That's a tough one, just because you don't know, I mean, I don't know.
Well, does it make sense to think about it a little bit? Again, not, I mean, I think this is just, this identifies something that we might want to spend some time on, not necessarily, maybe at the end of the day, we just decide, you know what, that is great. That's totally fine the way it is.
Mhm.
But I think, you know, it just raises a question. Is this an unintended consequence, or do we want to?
What is it? What does the LUZO say now about parking on site of residences?
No, I don't think it says anything, Jerry.
Is that-
Can you limit it, Noel, by putting like a minimum parking requirement per family or something like that?
I don't know, Bill. I think,
I mean, I think the COA is facing a little bit of this with their building next to us. I mean, I think they might have found something, but I mean, when you have 17 rooms, I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
so
Parking.
So
I-
currently, the housing authority, the Maple Lane apartment building, which we're all probably familiar with, is on 1.23 of an acre. And I think there are 24 units in that building.
Mhm.
So that's only a single-story building. It's not a two-story building. It's only a two-story.
And they must all have their own parking spot.
Yes, no, they don't all have their parking spot. And yes, I'm sorry, some of it is two-story.
Oh, okay.
But there is not enough parking there if every resident had a car.
Oh, okay.
I would just, again, urge everybody to maybe put parking as a whole separate topic,
Mhm.
and not necessarily
Yeah, no, that's something you're gonna have to deal with.
tie the two together.
Mhm.
And maybe parking becomes a subdivision standard instead of a land use standard. I don't know the answer to that yet. So we're gonna work on this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Fun stuff. All right, Kim, I brought up, I don't have the language right in front of me, but I did know that you and I talked a little while ago about a question related to individual campsites and campers. Is that something that we need to address still?
Yeah. She just stepped out, Noel.
No. All right, well, I'll skip over that one and get back to it. Then the other thing I would add to the list is, I think at the last town meeting, it was footnote 4 under the stream protection district that got bumped because the language wasn't right or something.
Yeah.
And we just need to add that one back to the list. Any other issues that you guys have come across, especially on the planning board, that we should be looking at? Parking is on the list.
Mhm.
By the way, we're also working on, we're going to be working on weekly rental issues.
Mm.
Yep.
Do we think that's going to start becoming an issue like Bar Harbor or do we not, or do we have no idea?
I think that the Board of Selectmen identified it as something that we might want to start to be concerned about, and how,
Okay.
and we need to understand how it affects, affordability and
Yep.
neighborhood areas in the town.
I think it's popped up as an issue already.
Has it? Okay.
The Board of Selectmen asked us to look at it, so we're
Yep.
going to look at it.
Yeah.
Sort of just to kind of outline the process there, I think we just
Mhm.
need to
Mhm.
take a little bit of time to understand, what is the current level of,
Do you have an estimate of how many weekly rentals there are, say in northeast,
We are working on trying to get some numbers for that.
Oh.
Stephanie, I don't have a good estimate right now.
There's no registration process for the town that they have to go through, right?
Not yet, and that's why I'm saying it may be a first step might be just to have some sort of registration, and then we'll
So you
see.
can get it, then you could get a real count.
Yep. Or, and what I've said at the selectmen's meeting was like, first, we ought to spend a little bit of time identifying what issue it is that we're really trying to address and whether or not that is the root cause of the issue.
No, what about the whole one kitchen thing in the shoreline zone?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, well.
Where's the-
And that's
Ask
in Norfolk.
Yeah.
What's the matter?
does somebody want
He came
kitchen?
back this week.
Oh, we came back with some ideas.
What happened? What I miss?
Kitchens in the shoreline zone.
Can you go over that, just a high level review of that issue, Bill, so I can get
Well, historically, we've only been limited to having only one allowable cooking facility within the shoreline zone. And, historically too, there are, many properties that don't. And, how do we deal with that? And especially, and just, how things are evolving and families are grouping together more, and there's just more living on some properties in town, and how do you accommodate that in the shoreline zone? And the one kitchen thing has been, again, historically tremendously limiting in some ways, and it comes up all the time.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, I don't see why you can't have a second kitchen if it's a single family dwelling for you and your family, not to rent.
Mm.
To rent the kitchen or not to rent?
Not to rent, like, not create a separate
Rental
dwelling
situation.
unit and rent it. But if it's an
Can you,
area that you like me and my husband and Lucas, like if I wanted to have,
Boathouse with a kitchen.
no, if I wanted to have another kitchen in my house or renovate my basement or add on and do a kitchen for Lucas, but, I mean, and then he moves and then I can't rent it. It stays within the confines of the family. But see, I don't know how DEP would be about that.
Stays within the confines of the house, doesn't it?
What's that?
We were saying building it in the same house, having two kitchens in one house.
Right.
You're saying you can't have two kitchens in one house?
In the shoreline zone.
You can't create two separate dwelling units in a building.
Does
Right,
a
for a second
kitchen
kitchen.
constitute a
Well, a kitchen, sleeping, eating. If it
Is that
needs
like a
to
garage
go-
apartment or like a garage apartment?
That would count as a separate dwelling unit.
That's a separate dwelling unit.
And
Okay.
the ordinance states in the shoreland zone, if you have more than one dwelling unit, you have to meet the dimensional requirements for the district you're in, times two.
We're running into things where like, a larger extended family has a larger extended family home use desire. They want to have the daughter and her family want to be downstairs and have their own cooking facility as a mom and dad are on the
Privacy,
middle floor.
yeah.
They've got their kitchen, and the other sister wants her thing on the second floor with her own kitchen. And
what kind of families are those?
yeah, well, extended families, I guess.
I guess so.
Mhm.
And that's fallout from COVID. I mean, just this kind of, huddling up, occupying more of a house and existing properties, or inquiring about building new. And it's coming up way more lately.
You see that a lot, the design.
But building a new house is separate than having one house broken up with 3 different kitchens in it.
Not necessarily.
I mean, before, you used to be able to, the planning board used to be able to allow another kitchen in a dwelling unit, provided it was for, like, care, like for caring for somebody
Like
else, where a nurse or somebody came and stayed with someone to take care of them. That was, then we got rid of that out of the
Can
ordinance,
you do it for religious reasons?
but, don't start, Katrina.
Just asking.
I mean, I wouldn't have any objection to it, but you also gotta be able to kind of, and it's all density, you know, development of density and regulating that, and I guess, because, and that's what DEP, I mean, that's in their rules, we have to follow what they have. We can't be less stringent, we can be more, but we can't be less.
Like, we've had situations where outside of the shoreline zone, we've had to have like the family sign a document saying, hey, look, the whole thing is gonna be for just family use, we're not renting this out or anything like that. And I don't know why that couldn't extend to the shoreline zone.
But they allow it in there, because you
Yeah.
can have an accessory residential dwelling unit.
Under the same roof though.
Yeah, it can be attached, right? No, that's what our accessory resident, it can be attached or detached.
Yep.
As long as it's not more than 75% of the size of the principal building. So if it's like a separate apartment on the second or third floor, as long as it's not more than 75% of the main dwelling unit below, you can have it, and it can be attached. It's like a garage with an apartment above, or you wanna convert your basement, but then you gotta deal with fire ratings and access and separate access and stuff like that.
Let's, I mean, I think we'll put that on the list, Bill, and look into it. But this just takes we gotta understand what it gets a little complicated when you're dealing with shoreline zoning standards, but it sounds like a dwelling unit question versus could you have, say I had a 3-bedroom house and I just wanted to have 2 kitchens in it. It doesn't necessarily make it an extra dwelling unit. It just makes me have a 3-bedroom house with 2 kitchens. But
when we deal with weekly rentals.
Yeah.
That'll be addressed.
that'll be a separate a different but related conversation. But could you have a house? I mean, so one thing I'm starting to learn more about weekly rentals a little bit, but there's the use of the property is still the same. It's still a residential.
Right.
It's just how you use that, the frequency of the residential use is what's, and how it changes the the affordability or the character of a neighborhood. There's some implications of that, but it's still a residential use fundamentally.
But you got
Yeah.
Airbnbs, you gotta be careful with them.
So that's the same. B&B is like,
Airbnb,
well, it's the same thing. It's still a residential use. It's just
right,
the
but then you
residents
got people coming in
every,
every weekly, coming in, that's gonna affect your neighbors.
That's just a weekly rental that's managed by somebody else.
yeah,
It's
the same.
just like you putting a sign out front of your door and renting a room by the week.
Right. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm not fully prepared to talk about weekly rentals tonight, but I just put that on the list. I don't want to I think there's a lot of emotion around that particular issue. And I think in order to have a fair discussion about it without, we need to spend a little bit of time just understanding what the issues are and getting all on the same page with that, as opposed to jumping right into the discussion where things are going to get misconstrued. Because we're not there yet. So.
Yep.
But Kim, while you stepped out, one of my questions was, I had on my list something to do with campers and individual campsites. Is that still an issue, or do we figure out how to deal with that?
Well, I think the reason why that's on there is because the definition of private campsite talks about tents, but individual private campsites talk about RVs. Isn't that what was the reason why it was brought up to you to put on the list?
Well, part of what, I think there were 2 issues there, right? If you have a scenario where somebody wants to bring their RV into the, like your individual private campsite on your property and use it as an individual temporarily, should you be able to do that? And then secondly, do you want do we need to look at the ordinance to see whether or not RVs can just be parked on a property and used for an accessory dwelling unit? Right?
Oh, I had somebody ask to do that.
Yeah.
Because they inherited a RV from somebody. And they wanted, instead of building a guest house, they want to put an RV on their property. And they want to use that as a guest house for family. And the ordinance says RVs are not dwelling units under the definition of a dwelling unit.
What happens if like someone's got a house under construction?
That, you can have that for 90 days, that's a permit through me, for 90 days. But to use it as a guest house for somebody, and they want to connect it to the town sewer, and no, you have life safety concerns, you have, if it's there for a certain amount of days, you have to bring it into compliance with a residential, like a residence, like a house. You can't, so you'd have to put in egress windows. You'd have to have, you got a second floor in it, I don't know if it's some real, but on a deck, you have to have code compliant stairs, you just can't do it. It's not feasible to make that happen. You can use it
Well,
temporarily.
no, and now with the housing crisis, especially in the summer, I mean, you see it all over Facebook now. People, I have an RV in my yard, you can rent that for how, is that really what we want to?
No. Yeah,
No.
no. In the ordinance, like I said, no, in individual private campsites, you're allowed to have them on site temporarily, but the intent was for temporary use, and that was for overflow of family, not for renting it. And it has, if it's there for 120 days, up to 120 days, you have to hook up to some type of sanitary, or else have a sanitary,
Is that per calendar year?
report, yep. Saying
That's-
like,
That's for tents, right?
what's
For
that?
tents?
That's the definition.
No, the ordinance says RVs and tents
Okay.
under individual private campsites. But the definition says an area of land which is not associated with a campground, but which is used for tent camping. Doesn't say RV.
Does that paid tent camping or this came up the other day in conversation with someone. They told me that they didn't think their kids could sleep in their backyard in a tent.
That they can.
That's what
Yeah.
I thought,
Can.
but they didn't
That-
believe me. Yep.
That they can.
But that used to require a permit.
It's still there.
It's still there.
No,
To camp in your
I
backyard.
issued a permit for somebody to use an RV on their property, because it required a CEO permit. They had to give me and they couldn't be there for more than 120 days. I went there a couple days, a couple times to verify it, and of course it was gone, and then it came back, so it's like, well, does that start another 120? And, because the neighbor was complaining about it, so I had to go and do like weekly inspections of it. And they gave me a sewer plan, like he dumps his waste, they come and pump it out, or they take it to a dumping station. So RVs are complicated. I don't disagree that they shouldn't be allowed, but I just think they should be intended for temporary use and only for family, not to hook up to septic full-time or sewer full-time and water and be used as a residence.
Mm.
And then rent it out.
Yeah.
So
But you are allowed to have them under an individual private campsite, provided you have to meet the dimension requirements times two, like having a dwelling unit. So if you require an acre, you have to have 2 acres to be able to have a main house and an RV on your property, but it's only intended for temporary use.
So until they start talking about wanting to hook it up to the town, it's just an RV. Correct?
Yes, it says it has to be up to 120
20 days.
acres.
Yeah.
I think this is what we all decided when we added this to the ordinance. If you hang on a sec, let me find it.
I guess you don't say RV in the back and let people live in it. Like my employees.
What'd you say?
I missed the first part of that,
Oh,
Stephanie.
sorry. I guess what we're saying is you, like, say I have the Colonels and I got an RV and put it in the back and let, my staff live in it. That's what we're trying to say no to, correct?
That's right, yeah,
Right.
you
Yep.
don't want that.
No, I don't anyway, but yes. I know there are businesses that are starting to think about that.
Yeah, so when a recreational vehicle, tent, or similar shelter is placed on site for more than 120 days per year, all requirements for residential structures shall be met. Oops, sorry. Including the installation of the subsurface wastewater disposal system in compliance with the state and main subsurface wastewater disposal rules unless served by a public sewage facility.
So they can have them there
It
for
has to
permit
meet- But it says it has to meet all requirements for a residential structure shall be
after
met.
what? After 120 days.
For 120 days, so up to 120, it's temporary.
Yeah.
But it's gotta go, we can't stay there year round. If they do over that, then they gotta come up with a septic design and or sewer, but they also have to bring the whole unit into the requirements for residential structures.
So nobody in Mount Desert has an RV that they drive down to Florida and they leave it in their backyard all year round?
But it's parked.
Yeah, but it's not, you can park it on your property, you just can't occupy it. I don't have a problem with parking an RV on your property.
Okay.
As long as the neighbor doesn't call me and say, oh, in the middle of the winter, that somebody's living in it.
Yeah, okay, that was my question.
What about like job site trailers, and things like that?
Those are temporary, those are not, they're used daily during the workday.
Yeah.
That's it. They're not, nobody sleeps in them. I've never, ever seen anybody sleep in them, or catch them anyways, let's say that.
But some of them are there for longer than 100,
Construction trailer,
but they're longer than 180 days, or so it seems that way.
but that's a construction, they're not occupying, they're not living there.
Okay.
They're not utilizing it overnight. Oh, I didn't see this.
In theory.
Yeah, that I know
Hi, Ellen.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
It's all
of.
right.
Ellen?
I'm gonna have to go in a minute.
Okay. So, Ellen, just to recap where we are and where we've headed, where we were just going down a list of things that we are adding to our to-do list for the next town meeting, which could be a special town meeting in January timeframe or the town meeting in the annual town meeting in May. We have some road and driveway access issues that we need to try to address. We have some minimum lot area and lot size standards in the village commercial district that we need to look at. We were just talking about individual campsites and just to track the standards through the ordinance a little more to make sure that they're consistent and deal with the things that we need them to deal with. We're adding back the footnote 4 stream, whatever we ended up skipping over. I think it was footnote 4, right? We skipped over at the town meeting in the stream protection district. And then we're going to explore how and if we should allow extra kitchens in a dwelling unit within the shoreland zone. And we're going to be starting the process of looking at what the issues about come up when you think about weekly rentals or vacation rentals in the town of Mount Desert.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
Yep.
Seems like a pretty decent list. So some of these are just, I think we're continuing to clarify things we've already started to work on. I do want to go back and look at the individual campsite thing, because all the issues that we're talking about right now are things that the reason why we put all those things, we've already talked about a bunch of this, and maybe we just need to tweak some stuff to make it a bit more clear. So we'll go from there. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
All right, so I think one of the first things that Kim and I are working on is the whole access issue, and like I said, we're meeting with Andy and somebody from his office again later in the week. So hopefully we'll have some verbiage to review with everybody the next time we meet, which I believe is going to be in September.
You know when?
Yes,
Or Tuesday.
third Tuesday in September. So it would be the 21st.
No, also you want to mention to Ellen about the remote policy?
Yes. So
Remote
Ellen,
meeting policy?
we adopted, again, you may have to give me the 101 if she's still there, the 101 on the remote meeting policy, but there is a remote meeting policy in place that everybody just adopted. I think that currently what that means is the preference is to have meetings in person, but there's the availability to do what we're doing tonight, particularly if you have some issues and reasons why you can't come in person. So we're gonna, I think, continue to do both, right, Kim?
Yes.
So Zoom will be an option. And you have it via email, Ellen. If you're looking for some light reading.
Thanks. Like, it's really hard. It'd be very difficult for me to get there
Sure.
because I'm at Birch Bay.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think the remote policy stuff is kind of for that purpose, right, Kim?
Yes, yep, that's to allow both in-person and remote still via Zoom.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Anything else we need to go over tonight before Jerry gets mauled by his dog?
That's not my dog. That's my daughter's dog. He's bonding with me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Thanks for your time, everybody.
All right. See ya.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Hey, Derlin,
Yeah.
I know that I have to report